Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to Reliability Matters, the podcast where we explore the processes, standards, and strategies that ensure reliable electronic assemblies. The next two episodes will be all about contract manufacturing, an area that can make or break the reliability and success of a product. My guest today is Raymond Novara, founder and owner of East End Assemblies, a U.S.-based contract manufacturer recognized for its focus on quality, customer service, and compliance with AS9100 and IPC standards. During our conversation, I'll be asking Raymond some key questions that every OEM should be considering, like what are the best practices for selecting a contract manufacturer? What common mistakes do companies make when working with a CM, especially in communication and handoffs? How can design-for-manufacturability feedback prevent problems down the road? What should customers know about transitioning from prototypes to volume production? And how can contract manufacturers help ensure long-term reliability, not just passing initial tests? If you're an OEM evaluating partners, an engineer preparing to hand off a design, or someone interested in how contract manufacturers contribute to product reliability, this episode is packed with insights, and it all starts right now.
Welcome to Reliability Matters, a podcast for the electronic assembly industry. Each episode covers topics related to reliability, best practices, and environmentally responsible assembly techniques, with insights from experts across the electronic assembly industry. Now, here's your host, Mike Konrad.
Hey, Raymond, thanks for joining me today. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
So you're in the contract manufacturing space, obviously.
Yep.
How'd you get there? Were you dreaming as a child to build electronic assemblies, or was it more of a pinball approach where you bounced off all the bumpers of life and ended up where you are?
Well, interestingly enough, yeah. I mean, I've kind of had two bites at the apple. I started off young. I was like 18 years old. I went to work with my cousin at a company called Triangle Electronics, which was a contract manufacturer in Hauppauge. I was there for about 5 or 6 years. And then I started my own company called B&R Electronics, which we were a contract manufacturer in Bohemia on Long Island here. And after about 8 or 9 years, we were struggling. And I had a company that I was building PC boards for called Eagle Telephonics. And he made me an offer to come and join that company to kind of try and get their manufacturing flowing properly. They were having problems with a manufacturer in India. So I came on board and I joined them. And really, it only took about a year or two to get their manufacturing issues worked out. And then I moved into a different end of the company, which was installing telecommunication equipment overseas in Africa and Central and South America. And I spent like the next 12 to 14 years working in mostly Africa and Central and South America. And then what happened was the company eventually went out of business, which I loved my job. I would have never left. I really loved the job. In some of the videos that I put out, I talk about a man named Rick Riccoboni who owned that company. I learned a tremendous amount from him and my father about, running a business. And then, at that point, I had 2 kids who were like, 10 years old or whatever. And I really wasn't looking to go do the traveling too much anymore. So I decided to give this thing another shot and, start another electronic assembly company with the things I've learned in the past. And started up about 18, 19 years ago. And here we are.
And here you are. You mentioned videos, and for my audience, if you don't follow Raymond on LinkedIn, you may want to. He puts out some pretty interesting behind-the-scenes videos, life as a contract assembler behind the curtain. But one of the other things, Raymond, that you put out are, what's the best way to describe it? Basically gratitude videos, where you talk about people in your life that have influenced you in a positive way. What's the motivation for that?
Yeah, I guess, like you said, just being grateful and realizing that I've had a lot of really great mentors in my life. Like I said, I can remember from being a young kid, my father was a great businessman. He was a guy who started off, you know, repairing watches and basically had taken himself to the top of his industry before, he unfortunately passed away. But, he had done very, very well in business. And he just always sat me down every time he came home from a business trip, and he would go through all the places he was successful and not successful and the mistakes that he made. And I've just always listened, to everything everybody has told me and tried to take those lessons. And I try to share some of those lessons. Like I spoke to you about my first business, and I think I learned so much more from the things that I did wrong the first time than the things I did right,
Mm.
and yeah, I just want to just share some of those things with some of the people, hopefully help them out. And I really like to focus on the young engineers too. The guys that are really trying, they're just out of school, they're designing their first products, maybe they're thinking about going into business for themselves, and just pass along some of the things that I've learned.
That's great. Yeah. Pass the torch. So East End is a AS9100 certified company and follows the J standard 001 and IPC A610, yada yada yada, all those standards that are kind of required now. How did achieving and maintaining those standards and those certifications change your internal process, and what are the biggest challenges in meeting these standards?
Well, it definitely made us a lot better. I can tell you, to be honest, I kind of fought it a little bit in the beginning because I thought it was a little bit, over the top, but
Yeah.
it's made us so much better. It's really put a lot of processes and policies in place, and it really just helps the company run itself. You've got, the company runs so much smoother now that we've got the AS9100, in place, and everybody knows what they're supposed to do. If one person's not in, there's another person that's ready to back them up. You've got the detailed documentation for everybody's position and what they should be doing, and it's really made a big difference. We obviously started off with the ISO 9000, and then as the years went on, especially the aerospace companies and the military companies, they all wanted the AS9100. So if you're going to do aerospace work or Department of Defense work, you've got to have the AS9100.
Yeah, I think that's. I've always been curious about the ISO standards because ISO alone doesn't guarantee you're going to make a good product. It just guarantees you're going to make the product the way you say you're going to make the product, right? I
Right.
mean, you're following your own rules and you're stating what your own rules and procedures are, and then you're coming up with processes to stick with those. But if your own rules are faulty, then that alone doesn't do anything. It's almost a self-certification in a way.
Yeah.
The A610, ISO 9100, the J standard 001, those are all written by other bodies, and they kind of hold all companies that comply with those standards and certifications to the same standard, right? That are peer reviewed and considered by the industry as best practice.
I
What
will say
advice?
one other thing. I think it's really important to have good, solid people working for you. The two positions. Well, obviously there's a lot of positions, but the quality manager is super important. You know, as the owner, I've always learned that there's like two parts to the company. This is one of the things my father taught me. He said, in order to be successful, you got to have a good salesman and you got to have a good production guy. And I've learned that you've also got to have a really good quality guy also, because the quality guy is there to protect the company from me, because I want to push. You know what I mean? I want to get stuff out. I want to get stuff out. So you really got to have a good quality guy who's going to, put the brakes on me. Make sure
Yeah.
that we're following the AS9100. Make sure that I'm not cutting any corners. And, listen, if my quality guy tells me we're not shipping, we don't ship. With my people, I have respect in what they say. I mean, of course, I'm going to put my 2 cents in, but at the end of the day, if he says we're not shipping, we're not shipping.
I have another podcast on the subject of entrepreneurship in business. It's called the Reluctant Entrepreneur Podcast. And we talk a lot about what you just said, where business owners, entrepreneurs, are sometimes the worst people to work for because you think out of the box. I say you as an entrepreneur tend to think out of the box. We as entrepreneurs tend to think out of the box. We tend not to follow rules. We tend to gravitate toward the shiny object in the corner. And we're excited to create new projects and new ideas and new products. But sometimes we're lost in the detail. And then we're going on to the next big project. We love to create. We love to build. The detail stuff is frequently better left to somebody else. And a lot of business owners and entrepreneur type people, when they're building their business, they think they're the best. And, what got them from A to B was successful. So they're going to just keep that same trajectory, that same business plan going from B to C and onward. And it starts to fail them. And then they have to, either start adopting all those new skills that your quality manager, for example, has, or they have to learn those new skills like your quality manager has, which is even more difficult. So at some point, successful companies, basically the owners of successful companies, the entrepreneurs who founded them, have to step aside and bring in talent more skilled than they are in certain disciplines and get out of their own way, right? And empower this new talent to do what they do best. And you do what you do best, which your quality manager can't do, and let your quality manager and all the other managers and team do what they do best. And that's where I think a lot of businesses fail. The owners, either through ego or whatever, just don't step aside. Or if they do hire talented people, they then interfere with their job. And to be able to let go and get out of your own way and empower a team and place a team with more discipline or more talent or more knowledge in certain things is great. I think that's going to, continue to allow your company to grow and things like that. And that's something that, ironically, a lot of business owners just don't get until it's too late. And maybe that's one of the lessons you learned early. I don't know. What advice would you give to a company that's evaluating contract manufacturers and wants assurance of quality via certifications? If you were looking, if you were not you and you were one of your customers, what do you think, being you now, what would you tell that person to?
Well, I can give
what
you
strategy
to you,
would you give them?
Like I've been recently searching for good bare board houses in the United States. So I've been going and visiting some of the different places. And I mean, one of the things that I'm always looking for is, are they organized? Do they have their act together? And I am looking at the facility as, I want them to walk me through the facility. I want to see that it's organized. I want to see that it looks like there's a flow to the work. I want to see a quoting place. I want to see a quality department. Sometimes it makes me nervous if I see like there's one guy handling like 4 or 5 different departments. So that's something I don't like, because right now that's what we're currently doing. We're looking for good board houses in the United States. We're doing a lot of ITAR work, and they're hard to find. They really are hard to find good bare board houses in the U.S. So yeah, that's one of the things we're doing.
Yeah, that's unfortunately one of the many industries that largely left the U.S. And I think you're still constrained if you're doing ITAR work, for example. I don't know if East End does ITAR work, but if you are doing ITAR work, I mean, pretty much everything has to be sourced here or stay here at least, and it's a very guarded set of systems. And I'm not sure if one does ITAR, if one can even have boards made outside of the United States, particularly from countries that may be adversarial.
Yeah, there are some rare cases and some companies, but it's hard to find. You're better off just sticking to doing them in the U.S. Be your best bet.
Yeah.
Don't get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Your company claims that its engineers provide design for manufacturability feedback. At what point in an engagement with a customer would you recommend they start thinking about design for manufacturability?
Right from the beginning. I mean, I have a problem today, with a prototype board that we're building for a customer. I won't tell you who it is. But again, they designed this board that is not going to be good when it goes to production. It's going to be a nightmare. And, they, for some reason, they get to a situation where they don't want to lean on their manufacturer. I build 90% of their products, and, they should be coming to me right from the beginning. It's okay. You get your concept, you get maybe your initial design done, but that's when you should come to your manufacturer at that point and say, hey, this is what we're thinking of doing. These are the components we're thinking about using. What do you think? Let me see the layout. Let me see how it's going to go. And I can tell them how many boards we can put in a panel, because it's all about profitability. You know what I mean? We want to make money building it, but also I want to make it profitable for them. I want to be able to make the cost as low as possible for them. And if they don't let me in the beginning, and they've put hundreds of engineering hours into it, and they just show it to me at the end of the day, they're not going to want to go back and re-engineer it. They're not going to want to move ICs around and maybe take a board that's, 8 layers and bring it to 10 or 12 layers. So you really got to get us involved early on. I would suggest even right from the beginning. I have some customers that are very good at that. They'll reach out to us, they'll tell us which components they're thinking about using. My guys that run my pick and place room, are fantastic. They've been doing this forever. They spend all day studying components. They know which components are going to be easy to place, are going to be hard to place, how to do it. And I make them accessible to everybody. So, if they reach out to them and they pick their brain, they'll make a product that's easy to produce. Not something that, you end up having to go back to the drawing board with 4 or 5 times, which happens all the time, believe me.
I'll bet. I'll share an anecdote. I interviewed another contract manufacturer probably 2 or 3 years ago, a U.S. contract manufacturer. And he was telling me a story that one of his customers, that they had to assemble a bunch of boards, and they also wanted the CM to acquire the boards, basically broker the boards. And one of the requirements of this board was that it have black solder mask, not green, not clear, black solder mask. Okay. So they didn't see anything. They think, okay, whatever, just choose a color. So they got the boards fabricated. And when they were assembling the boards, they were having all these solderability issues, bridging and other things. And they fought with it. So there was a ton of rework in this particular production run to make the board right. And it was driving this CM crazy, and of course eroding their profit because that rework wasn't really built into the original cost estimate. So at some point, out of sheer frustration, this CM reached out to the customer and said, we think it might have something to do with the black solder mask. Do you need that? And the customer says, I don't care. So they spent months reworking product, trying to figure out what was wrong based on a requirement in the statement of work that was not even necessary. He goes, well, why did you specify black? He goes, I just thought it looked cool. He goes, but I don't care at the end of the day. So I'll bet there are 1,000 things like that one little tweak, like you said, an 8-layer to a 10-layer or whatever, a different color solder mask, different type of solder mask, maybe a different
You're
place
right. And
for
it goes
vias.
to like BGAs and stuff like that. you really need to be careful. You have micro BGAs, you have BGAs that are big, and you may not want to put certain components on the same side of the board as a BGA. And if they come and they talk to us, we can tell them, hey, put this component on the other side, because you have different stencil thicknesses, and you can get step up and step down stencils. But if you can avoid that, you're going to make your assembly process much easier.
Yeah, and spend a few less dollars, because
Yep.
that's a little bit more expensive. Your company handles everything from initial prototype to full production. What are the biggest pitfalls when transitioning from prototype to volume production, and how do you help customers navigate that? Things don't always scale the way one thinks they'll scale. So how do you navigate those waters?
Well, that's a good question. You start to get into then is to again, looking early on at product availability, component availability. Making sure that when you're designing your prototypes, that that there's going to be adequate amount of components available for you when you want to go to production. I would say that's probably one of the biggest things that we face, is that somebody will go out there and design something with, let's say, like an analog device part, and they're able to get 30 or 40 of them to build their prototypes. But when it comes to going to production and they need 10,000, they've got to wait 18 months. And now they're really up against it. That has actually always been a problem, but it really became heightened during COVID. So people have become more aware of that, but it's still an issue that we face all the time. And then again, it kind of takes it right back to what you were talking about in your previous thing, which is getting to us early, so that we can look at the design. That's the key. You know what I mean? Is like letting us look at the design early, so that in the prototype, and when we're building the prototypes, we don't have to make huge changes. We don't have to take a BGA and throw it on the other side of the board or something like that. Those are really the big things. And then, we can step it up into production slowly too. You don't want to go from building 100 pieces to building 20,000 pieces either. You'd like to go build 100, let me build 1,000, let me go to 5,000, and then we can go up from there, because you're going to learn as you go along. You're going to tool up. You're going to make adjustments as you go, and may be able to save the customer a decent amount of money. There you go.
Right, and there's this level of scale where if you're building 10,000 assemblies, then an engineering change, which might be expensive on its own, will pay off over 10,000 assemblies, where it's not worth making a change for 10 or 100 or whatever. There's this economy of scale that probably
Exactly.
falls into place as well. You gave an example of a long lead time. How's the supply chain doing? I know for a while, as we were coming out of that stupid pandemic thing, was crazy. I live in Southern California, and off of our coast, there were hundreds of container ships just anchored, just running their engines and waiting, sometimes up to 6 weeks, 2 months to be unloaded. And when you can even fill a container with stuff. And I think it's better now, but what's your take on that?
It's definitely much better. It's it's back to me. It's back to the way it was before COVID. Some companies may have not completely caught up yet, but for the most part, it's much better. It's much better than it was. And I mean, a lot of it has to do with, I think companies learned during the COVID area that they have to designing parts that are available. People kind of got spoiled. They were only, never waiting more than 8 or 12 weeks for a part. And when companies started to have to wait 6, 9 months, even, 12 to 15 months, that's a killer for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you can't ship your product for a year, that could bankrupt some companies.
Yeah,
And I saw
absolutely.
other companies that were very smart. I saw companies that went out and bought, 15 months worth of product. At least they protected themselves.
Yeah, our company was one of those companies that actually contributed to the supply chain shortage because we don't build things on a component level, but when we had the opportunity to acquire more parts than we needed, we would do it. Normally, prudent cash flow, concerns would not allow us to do that. We would buy on a just-in-time basis, but when all of a sudden that time was questionable, we started switching to a just-in-case basis, which meant we were buying inventory we wouldn't use for another year.
Right.
But we knew we would eventually use it. So we basically converted liquid cash assets to inventory assets, which were still redeemable for cash, just over a longer period of time. And our warehouse was just jam-packed. I mean, we literally were going up to the ceiling. In fact, at one point, the fire department came in and went, not that high, lower it down. So we had to install more shelving, but we had to triple, quadruple our inventory. And we were shopping all over the country for third source, fourth source, fifth source. Just if we can get it, we can get it. And because we don't want, like you don't want a small chip capacitor stopping production. We don't want a tiny pump in our world, stopping the shipment of a $100,000 machine. So
Exactly.
it's
It's just good business. It's being smart about it. If you, like you said, you got to have the cash flow. I mean, which all businesses, I don't care how big or small you are, have cash flow issues, and it's something that you have to manage. But we do our best with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Your company offers turnkey services, including cable, harness fabrication, final product assembly, etc. Which basically simplifies customer supply chains. What are the trade-offs between asking a contract manufacturer to procure all of the components versus a free issue of parts by the customer? Are there any advantages or disadvantages?
Yeah, I mean, I would much prefer to do a turnkey than customer supplied.
You're
The
more in
big thing.
control.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's so frustrating to you know, let's just talk about customers who supply the kits. They'll give you a kit where it has 95% of the components, and the minute you'll sit on that kit for, let's say, 2 months, and the minute they get their last components in so that you can build, they want you to ship within a couple of days, and it just makes it very hard to manage your floor, to manage your lines properly. At least this way, when I'm controlling, buying the material, it's much easier for me to control my shop and to run my lines and to set my workflow. It's really not easy when I mean, from a cash flow point of view, it's better because you're not going out and buying the components. But after being in business for 18 years, we've developed great credit lines with customers, and as long as you've got good, solid customers who are paying their bills on time, that shouldn't be an issue. But no, I definitely prefer to do as much as I can turnkey. I'd say we're probably at the point where we're doing like 80 to 85% of what we do is turnkey. Yeah, back in the day, you're right. I mean, you know, years ago, let's just say even 15 years ago, you still probably had more people doing, kit supplied than not. But also, my people are really good at it. It's what they do all day. You know what I mean?
Right.
I've got a department they know where those parts are. They know how to find them. And also there's been a lot of great programs developed over the last several years to really help with the searching of components.
Yeah. In fact, I'm interviewing someone in the next few weeks on that subject. That's embedding AI technology and supply chain management and things like that. And that seems to be a good use of AI. I mean, there's a lot of data points that have to be reviewed and things like that AI can do quite well.
We're trying one right now, actually. We're
Oh,
trying
yeah.
an AI software to help us with purchasing components and searching for them and filling out the BOM, pricing it out.
Yeah, I think AI is landing quite positively on our industry at least a couple of categories. One was this is supply chain, and the other is inspection. It reminds me of a medical doctor looking at an image of an MRI. When I see an image of an MRI or a CAT scan, it almost looks like remember the days before digital televisions. We had rabbit ear antennas on the TV, and sometimes all you get was, we called it snow. No reception at all. That's what these medical images look like to me. I can't tell the difference. I can't see what I'm seeing. Very well trained doctors can, or AI systems can. They can see things even doctors can't. And I think the same applies with inspection. Using AI for counterfeit detection, using AI for the obvious stuff, orientation, polarity, all that stuff, skew, all the things that humans can detect by inspection, I think is really going to up the game quite a bit. Can you share examples? And we'll withhold all names. We'll protect the guilty. Can you share examples of where poor communication from the customer side causes delays, budget overruns, or quality issues? We don't need to out any customers, but what types of mistakes do customers make that lead to those issues?
Well, like you said, communication issues. Not getting back to us. We'll have a board on the machine, something that they need turned around right away. We'll come to them with questions, and they're just unable to get us the answers. Could be polarity questions, could be, the component doesn't fit on the board, and it may take them days to get back to us. And that's absolutely a killer, because eventually I got to take their job off the machine, and I got to, maybe even gets to the point that they take so long to get back to me that I got to start breaking down the job. And then they're really in trouble, because then they're going to the back of the line. And I'm always shocked sometimes, because it's always seems to be the biggest companies that have the worst communication issues. Questions that you think would be so easy to get answered sometimes take days and days and days. And even the same, when even at the beginning level, like, you'll have a customer come to you, they want a job quoted, they tell you this is going to be a quick turn job, I'm going to need it done right away, I need it by next Friday. Okay. And you do whatever you can, you get them the quote immediately, and then that's it. Then you don't hear from them anymore. And then Thursday of next week, they're like, okay, here's the PO. I still need the job by tomorrow. It's just bad communication like that is not good. You really need to keep a constant open dialogue. And you could tell, the companies that have their act together, they are in constant communication with you all the time. They're letting you know where they stand, what's going on, when they plan on running the job. And they are much, much easier to deal with. And I always feel like it's a breakdown in that they never know which person is taking off. So
Yeah.
Now this guy is gone. Nobody can get a hold of him. Nobody can get an answer. So it just waits for 2 or 3 days for this guy to come back, and then he comes back, and the next person is out, and then you wait again for another 2 or 3 days.
Too many chefs in the kitchen.
Yeah, that's a problem we run into quite often.
From your perspective, what are the top 3 red flags a customer should look for when selecting a contract manufacturer?
That's a good question. Quality to me, that's one of the things I really hang our hat on. Quality, quality, quality. I always share this gentleman in our industry. His name is Don Dennison, and he told me many years ago. He said to me, Ray, he said, your delivery is important, your price is important. He said, but the single most important thing is the quality. And for me, I want to make sure when I give my customer the product, I want to make sure that it works. And that's why if I can, I always ask if I can test also. So quality is obviously, to me, the most important thing. And then how long it takes them to respond to you on a quote. If you give somebody something to quote and they take forever to get back to you, it's one of two things that are going on. Number one, either they're not very interested in the job, or number two, they're just so overloaded that you're going to have problems right away. That's a big red flag for me. If it takes me a long time to get a quote from somebody on something, I know that it's going to be a mess all the way through. That's for sure.
What do you do if you get a customer interested in your services that really overemphasizes cost at the expense of quality? Do you have to have a come to Jesus kind of sit down with them and speak an inconvenient truth, or how do you manage that? We all grew up in with the mantra, the customer's always right,
Yeah.
which I understand the spirit of that. It's not technically true. If they were right, then they would be doing it themselves, right? So,
Right.
but
Yeah. I mean, I
how do you
always say
balance that?
also, if you try hard enough, sooner or later, you'll find somebody that'll build it in their basement for free.
They're out
But,
there, yes.
you know, there comes a point in time where you have to walk away from it. Um, I kind of try to stay away from those customers, to be honest with you, because I want to deal with people that want both of us to make money. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want, they have to understand that I have to make a profit. I got to pay my people. So I want people that understand that. But I also need them to make money, because I need them to be around to continue to make money. Um, you know, I'm, al- I'm always willing also for a new customer, to do stuff for free in the beginning. You know what I mean? Like I'll give a guy, between $3,000 and $5,000 worth of labor for free. If I think the customer, has great potential. Let's say if it's a guy that I think we could do a couple $100,000 worth of business with a year, $300,000 worth of business a year. I'll tell him, hey man, I'll do your first job for free. I want to show you, what we can do. And I've gotten, some of my biggest customers that way. Now they're my my vice president of sales doesn't like that, but we have gotten two of our biggest customers that way. One of them we've been doing business with for 15 years. And so it's a fine line. But when I start to hear that customer that's really constantly always crying about the price, it's not a good sign, because we all know, contract manufacturers on Long Island, we all kind of know where we got to be, and you can tell also, it depends on how busy somebody is. If somebody's a little slow, you might see one of your competitors starting to lower their prices because they're trying to bring in some more work. But when you start seeing some prices that are going really, really crazy low, you just got to walk away, because you're not going to make any. I learned this also. I learned that just because you're busy doesn't mean you're making money. And that can be the worst thing.
That's very true. That's welcome to business, right? I mean,
Yep.
that's one of the first lessons we learn.
Yep.
I used to think that as long as we're busy, we're doing well, and
Yep.
we're a hamster in a wheel. At that point.
Exactly. And
You
that
talk
can be
about
one of the worst things.
you talk about the various contract manufacturers on Long Island. Long Island, on my day job, my business side, Long Island probably has the highest density of customers anywhere in the world for us. I can't believe on that tiny little strip of land relative to the entire United States, how many contract manufacturers there are in kind of a suburban, it's not like a huge industrial, it's not Detroit, right?
Right.
It's a lot of homes and communities, and it's a suburb of the big city, and it's just, I don't know. I'm just totally dumbfounded by how many of your business peers ended up building their businesses on Long Island. Is that because you live there and you didn't want a long commute, or is there some strategic benefit for being on the island?
Well, no, it's certainly very expensive to operate here. And, I am encouraged by some contract manufacturers that have really blown up pretty big here because, I've often wondered, how far can we go here? Do we have to go down to Arkansas or, Tennessee or something like that, to take it to the next level? But, what happened here on Long Island was, back in the 80s, you had Grumman and you had Fairchild, who had thousands and thousands of engineers, and both of those companies basically left at the same time. And you had so much talent, available. And a lot of these guys went out and started their own engineering companies. They started their own businesses, and which has, spilled out to a lot of work for guys like me and other guys like me. And I think that's why, you see so much electronic work here on Long Island. And we still got a lot of companies here. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a lot of business on Long Island, but there's also a lot of contract manufacturers here now.
Yeah, I think it's disproportionate, which is
Yeah.
great.
Oh, for sure.
Every time we sell a piece of equipment in Long Island, for years, I would think, okay, well, we'll never get another Long Island sale because we've sold to everybody. And I assumed the last sale incorrectly, probably for 2 decades. And my gosh, you guys grow and multiply, and it's amazing. The world is getting smaller. That's an understatement. What challenges do you see customers face in making sure their products meet global compliance when manufacturing overseas versus domestically?
Say that again.
You may have customers that are going to be sending products overseas. Maybe you're competing with a CM that is in China or Malaysia or Mexico or somewhere not here. If they're looking to get another quote from you, and they're also looking at overseas companies, how do you ensure that you're meeting any compliance issues that might be unique to Europe and maybe not applied so much here? How do you keep on top of all the various global standards and various manufacturing techniques and various materials that are used in different countries that are maybe not as favored here?
Gotcha. Well, that's where I lean on my quality department and my operations manager to make sure that they're on top of that stuff all the time. Obviously staying on top of the ITAR, scrubbing our documents that we get to make sure that there's no kind of restrictions on the documents whatsoever. That's super important. From the moment you get the documents in the quote, sending them into my quality department first and my production department, and I have them all go through the documents, make sure that we're not missing anything, make sure that we're following everything that has to be followed. We pretty much build to IPC 610. We're either going to we build to class 3 or class 2. We don't build to class 1. If we have to get into the European things where, most of the stuff there is like lead free, we build lead free, we build leaded. As far as competing though, overseas, it has gotten better. The tariffs have, although they've made it very, very challenging in the industry in certain ways, it's also given us the opportunity now to compete with China in certain situations. Number one, a company has to know, if they send their product to be built over in China, it's going to be copied. So, which they're all not thrilled about to begin with. So now, with the tariffs being in place and the cost of shipping being what it is, we can get close to what they're doing it for. Maybe we can't still get down to the same cost that they're doing it for, but we can get closer. And like you were talking about with, AI coming involved and, how far equipment has come, especially with inspection equipment and the 3D AOIs that we now have, and the pick and place machines, it's come a long way. So we can be much more competitive than we used to be able to. And I think that's one of the reasons why, Long Island is booming. There's a lot of work for the contract manufacturers now. And companies that I'm dealing with, even Long Island companies that I'm dealing with, that were sending most of their stuff overseas, have now brought a lot of it back to the States and trying to get it built in the States.
Yeah, the significant amount of reshoring going on, and second best to that would be nearshoring. At least if you're going to send it outside of the country, keep it as local as possible. Maybe make North America your goal rather than other continents. One of the things that affects both of our businesses is miniaturization. Miniaturization is good for my business because my business, obviously, for those who don't know, is in the cleaning world, and boards with very miniaturized components and high density components, low standoff components, have a much lower tolerance for residue than through-hole boards would have, for example.
Yeah.
So the need for cleaning is greater. So we're kind of fans of miniaturization, although it's a double-edged sword because miniaturization also creates situations where it's way more difficult to clean. So our equipment has to evolve. From a contract manufacturing standpoint, you've seen an awful lot of changes in that miniaturization has brought. So much so that you may have had to over time upgrade your pick and place machines, upgrade your printers, maybe even upgrade reflow ovens, and invest in inspection technology that you wouldn't normally need back in the day. When you first started into this industry. How do you keep up with that? I know that's a capital intensive move, but how do you keep up with the ever evolving rate of miniaturization? We had HDI, high density interconnects. Now we have UHDI, ultra high density interconnects. At some point, we're going to have stellar, ultra high, uber density interconnects. We're just going to throw adjectives on the front end of each word each time things get smaller. How do you keep abreast with that, or even stay ahead of that, if that's even possible?
Well, it's like you said, we have to stay on top of the equipment, and we're constantly buying and upgrading equipment always. Switching over to you guys, and buying the aqueous equipment was huge for us. I can't even tell you, not to just blow smoke at you, but it did huge savings for us and made a huge difference. So, getting the right equipment is huge. That was a real big thing for us. And, just making sure that you have the right equipment that can place the right components. These young engineers that come out, they want to place the smallest components they can place. That was one of the things I was dealing with today. Was like I had this board, it has all this real estate on it, and this guy is placing 01005s and 0201s, and I'm like, you realize, you're making a part that you're not going to be able to rework at all, because you guys just aren't, number one, going to have the skill, but you're not even going to have the equipment to rework it. But my equipment can place it, so we're fine with it. But you just got to stay on top of it, and you've got to make sure that you are willing to invest in the equipment. We're constantly buying equipment all the time. It never stops. Every year we probably spend well over $1 million in equipment.
Wow. Well, that's good to see that there's a need for that. That means you're growing. That means that means the industry is getting more complicated. Also, sometimes you have to buy more equipment, even if you're not growing, just to continue the status quo. But I'll tell you, I think in all the business fields you could have chosen, looking back, you did fall into a very complicated, highly competitive, very technical, capital-intensive industry. Raymond's going, yeah, duh, I know that now. But the fact that you've been around for so long is probably a testament to the fact that you're doing it right. I mean, I've seen many contract manufacturers come and go, and mostly for the same reasons. The ones that are successful have a lot of similarities, common denominator traits to other ones that are successful. And pretty much the ones that failed, we could all predict, short terms, when you sell them equipment, short terms, because you don't think they're going to be around for too long. But it's good to see that you guys are successful and growing and investing in the future. As we finish up, what are some of the biggest mistakes customers in general make when either selecting a contract manufacturer or communicating with a contract manufacturer? What do you see as a red flag in a customer, and how do you work with that customer to smooth that out?
Well, you brought it up before, which is you have some customers that are all they care about is price. You know what I mean? They don't care about anything else. For them, it's price driven, and they're going to keep beating down the door until they find the guy that can do it for the cheapest price. And I can't tell you how many times in my 18 years I've had a guy come to me, ask me to quote a job. I'll quote a job for him. And let's just pick a number. Let's just say I'll say I could do it for $10 a board. And he'll come back to me and we'll say, listen, I really want to go with you, but Bob says he can do it for $4 a board. And I'll be like, I can't get to that price. There's just no way I can get to that price. He'll give Bob the board, and then he'll come back to me 3 months later and he's like, listen, Bob is not delivering. He's like, you got to bail me out here. I need help. I can't even tell you how many times that has happened to me. So
now it's $12 a board.
Yeah. Well, I'm always, I probably should be a lot more cutthroat than I am, but
I think you're doing it right.
I'm always trying to look at the long-term things. You know what I mean? Looking down the road.
Sure. No, I think you're doing it right. Finally, last question, Raymond, and I appreciate all the time you've given me and my customers, or my customers, my subscribers, my viewers, my listeners. What's your forecast? Get out your crystal ball, become a fortune teller for a moment. Where do you see the electronics industry going over the next several years in terms of direction, growth, shrinkage, geopolitical stuff, whatever? I mean, give me a snapshot, Ray's view of the electronic assembly industry over the next few years.
I think it's the place to be. I mean, I tell all my guys, you're in the perfect industry. Even salaries have gone up. Even just for my employees have gone up so much. When I first got started in this industry, we were kind of like the low end guys of the world, but it's not like that anymore. People can really, they can make a good living. I mean, my guys are going out and buying houses and driving nice cars and growing their families, which is the most important thing to me. You know what I mean? I want my guys to live the American dream. I want them to be able to buy a home. I want them to be able to raise their family properly. I want them to be able to buy their kid a baseball glove and bat. That's really important to me. And I think, this industry is booming in that way, and, the aerospace industry and the Department of Defense alone gives so much work here that, pays very well. But now also, with the equipment, we're able to also compete. Listen, I don't think I'm ever going to be building, 10 million PlayStations, but there's plenty of products out there, you know what I mean, in the, 10 to 20,000 piece range that we can be very, very competitive on, and there's a lot of companies, and that's a lot of business that was going overseas, let's just call it China and India, that now is coming back. And I think the sky's the limit. I really do. I think there's plenty of work here for everybody. So I feel good about it. I really do.
Good. I agree with everything you just said. And by the way, I'll give you one little bit of parting advice. You mentioned earlier, more kind of in theory, hypothetically, you could move to Arkansas or Tennessee, right? My advice to you, if you ever think seriously about that, do not, because your accent will not fit down there. They will totally out you, my friend. And,
Yes,
and
yes, I know.
you're not one of
Well, I
us.
don't
Yeah.
plan on moving, but maybe, expand, like expanding, shall we
Yeah.
say. But no,
Yeah.
I get it. I don't hear it, but I'm sure you do.
Well, I can hear it. Yeah. I live in California, and we're kind of infamous for leaving the state, invading other states, driving up the real estate prices, and we're not generally welcome at those places. So I think a lot of places like Nashville, like North Carolina, like Idaho, like certain parts of Texas that are seeing this influx of this exodus from urban areas, whether it's from New York or California or whatever, are kind of like, okay, we're full, go home. So I love that you're building on Long Island. I love even more that you're building in the U.S. I like your strategies. I love the videos that you put out on a regular basis on LinkedIn about people who have influenced your life positively and more of a philosophical approach to business rather than buy from us. It's good. I love the fact that you invest into the future with equipment, it's good to see the American dream alive and well in Long Island. Raymond Novara, for my thank you for being my guest today, and for my audience that would like to get more information on East End Assemblies. If you are watching this on YouTube, right down here, you can go to the show notes, and contact information for Raymond's company will be there. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, when it's safe to do so, pull over, look at the show notes on your podcast app, and that information will be there as well. Raymond, are you coming out to Surface Mount Technology International, SMTAI, in October in Chicago?
Yeah, we're planning on doing that. So maybe
Great.
We'll see about that.
I will be there, so I hope to see you.
Okay, great.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, thank you, Raymond. I really appreciate all your time.
Okay, take care.
And that's a wrap on another episode of Reliability Matters. Thanks for hanging out. Whether you listen to the podcast on your favorite podcast app or watched it on YouTube, I really appreciate you being here. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future episodes. If you're on YouTube, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Those two simple clicks really help us expand our reach. New shows drop every second and fourth Tuesday of the month, so mark your calendars. A big thanks to PCB Chat from the Printed Circuit Engineering Association at pcbchat.com, and Ascendo Reliability at reliability.fm for syndicating the show. Got a question or an idea for a future episode? I'd love to hear from you. Just shoot me an email at mike@reliabilitymatterspodcast.com. Want to learn more about the podcast? Head over to reliabilitymatterspodcast.com. Thanks again for being here. Until next time, keep learning, keep doing it right, and remember, reliability matters. I'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thanks for listening to the Reliability Matters podcast. Join us on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month for new episodes of Reliability Matters.